Welcome to Podula Rasa. I'm David Blank.
And I'm Jim Esch.
This is a podcast about finding something in nothing.
Show 15, Coloring Without Staying in the Lines. The Thom Williams Experience, fragment 8. This week on Podula Rasa, we interview Danielle DeCaro Buchanan, who was a student of Thom Williams back at Marple Newtown High School. They were very close friends, and she's going to share some wonderful memories and stories about her time spent with him. So let's get right on to the interview.
I grew up in Newtown Square, from about age 12 on. I went to Paxson for middle school, and then obviously Marple Newtown for senior high school, all 4 years, and graduated from there.
And is what year did you graduate?
99.
So 99. What happened after you left high school? Did you go to college or go into the working world?
So I went to college at Drexel my first year, and then I transferred to Westchester University for my sophomore year.
It's my alma mater.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And then didn't end up finishing college. I dropped out, got a job, and I've been there ever since. So been at the same place for 17 years. I'm an employee benefits consultant. So I'd like to think I'm pretty successful and,
Sure.
in a good spot, worked my way up the ranks and, happy to be where I am. So
when you were at Westchester, and Drexel and Westchester, did you have a major?
It's pretty funny. So going through high school, and obviously I'm sure we'll get into that, but I never really thought, no one in my family had ever gone to college. No one in my family had ever graduated high school before me. So I always thought, hey, then, the next thing is I go to college, right? That's what everybody does. I go to college. So I sort of applied to Westchester in the first month of my senior year, got accepted, was going to go for English, done, signed and done, and in about May of my senior year, I was sitting with Tom and we were just kind of rapping about stuff. And I was like, wouldn't it be so cool to be like an interior designer? And he's like, well, why wouldn't he be? And I said, well, I don't even, he's like, just go do your thing, And so it was in May of my senior year that I started looking into that. And I found Drexel's program, and it was a very good program. And, I had done well in high school. So I, sort of last minute pulled the plug on Westchester and said, I'm going to go to Drexel. Got accepted. Tom reached out to the superintendent and got him connected with me, wrote me a recommendation. Like it was, everybody was so cool back then that he knew, and that anyone that ever came into contact with me, knowing that, he was, I was close with him, was just always a pleasant experience. So, that's how I ended up going to Drexel.
And was for interior design?
For interior design,
wow.
Which I've always had a passion for. But, about a year into Drexel, I kind of had a little bit of guilt that I was spending all this money for school. And I ended up saying, you know what, I'm just going to make it easier, and I went to Westchester for my next year for art, though.
For art, okay.
For art.
Cool. Let's get into a little bit of your memories of Tom. When did you first meet him, and what was that like?
So I was a sophomore. I was in English class, some advanced English class with Miss Gallagher, I think, at that point. And, I was probably a couple months in, and I think she saw that, like, I was showing up to class and I was getting my work done, but I wasn't super into the class. And, she just kind of was, I think, a little bit like, hey, like, what's your deal? And she said, why don't you go talk to the teacher next door? Just sit with them. And so I was like, okay. So I went over and I met Tom, and he and I would just, our relationship and friendship started really because he and I would sit through, hours in his classroom and read And we would sit there and read a sentence and then just talk about what it meant for hours. You know, that was it. That was like the birth of just this life-changing friendship for me.
So when you would sit and talk about Emerson with him, I want to get into that a little more.
Yeah.
What was this, after school or during class time or something?
During class time. It got to the point where I stopped going to my regular English class, and Miss Gallagher was like, it's cool to go do your thing, you know, and I would go and sit with Thom. He would have either a study hall or a class of people who were working independently. So it wasn't necessarily where he was up instructing or teaching. And we would sit at his desk and just talk and read and interpret. And, you know, that just basically was the foundation of our friendship.
How did you get started on Emerson? Was that part of your assigned schoolwork, or is this something you were interested in?
I honestly think, you know, when I went and was sitting talking with him, I think he just had a stack of books on his desk, and I picked it up and I said, I've always wanted to read, you know, Emerson, but Emerson is one of those things where you read it and you think you've read it and you kind of interpret it and you take it in. And then when you start to think about it, you realize it's got so much depth to it that you could spend 30 minutes talking about one paragraph. And that's what we did. It took you to like a level of critical thinking and interpretation that you didn't really get into in typical English class or anything like that.
Right.
And it was really intriguing to me, really rewarding to me.
I teach English and creative writing at Widener University. I frequently teach Emerson, you know, not every semester, but I love going back to him. Do you remember any favorite essays by him?
Not necessarily an essay, but there was one thing that Thom would say to me, and I don't even remember specifically where this came from, but it was, nothing is at last sacred but the integrity of your own mind. I mean, I kind of feel like that's a little bit of a theme for, you know, why I was so drawn and so rewarded by my friendship with him, right? It was like just integrity of just being a good person and being connected to other people and understanding what other people teach you and understanding that, you know, it's just not a teacher that is teaching. It's every single person in your life that's teaching you.
Yeah, I think that quote comes from his essay, Self-Reliance, which is the one I tend to teach.
Oh, really?
It's so deep and rich. And you're right, you can spend hours on a paragraph. And it's challenging for the students. Like, I try to warn them ahead of time. This is dense, you know.
It is dense.
And we talk a lot about Emerson's style and about how he's very quotable. So he writes in these aphorisms. You can just pull these one-liners out of his work, and they go right into a quote book. And also the thing I'm going to like lecture about self-reliance now, pardon me, but I just love it so much. No one writes quite like Emerson.
Right.
His style is very self-reliant. Like, he's very individualistic in the way that he writes, which is, I think, he's practicing what he's preaching. Mm-hmm. He wants us to be self-reliant too. So what better way to do that than in a very unique style? And I think this comes back to Thom Williams, who was like such a unique person. Mm-hmm. His personality, I mean, was there anyone like him in your life or even your schooling life, if you just want to talk about teachers? Anybody who like would be a parallel to him?
No, never before, never since.
One of a kind, right? I have the same feeling. Yeah. This guy just kind of breezed into my life, and it was a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, honestly. Just life-changing.
If I could probe into that a little bit more, what changed in your life after, you know, getting to know him, becoming friends, and spending all this time?
Yeah. You know, I think maybe a little bit of the fact that, you know, the age that I was at, I you know, you tend to feel a little bit lost at that age, right? You have this whole world ahead of you. You're just figuring out what it means to be an individual on your own. And I think that For me, I at that age, I guess 15, 16, understanding the realization, I guess, that you're your own person, your future is your own path. Simple, stupid, fun are all good, right? Go out and stand under the sky, right? You're standing under the same sky as every other person. And that's, those are things that he said frequently, right? You get a crack at the mystery just like everybody else, Danielle. That's a hard concept to realize on your own when you're 15, 16 years old. At least it was for me. Just creating that space where creativity, without limits, was welcomed, encouraged. If you started a little fire of creativity, he threw gas on it, right? It was like, go. It helped me sort of break down walls that I was holding on my own, right? One of the things that was the most silly, stupid, fun, but amazing things that we would do is sit and color, right? In a coloring book. And I remember the first couple times we sat in the back room and we were just, shooting the breeze and coloring and laughing and people walking through and every other thing. And I sat and colored like I learned to color, where you stay in the lines. And he looked at me, he's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm coloring." And he said, "Why don't you let go a little bit?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he was like, "Tear the page, glue it back together, cut out a page from a magazine, slap it on there." And we just started coloring without staying in the lines. And it sounds silly maybe, but it was an exercise in creativity that really changed how I approached a lot of things. It's like, hey, you don't have to color between these lines because they're on the paper, right? It's a simple, intricate thing that meant a lot. And we did that for hours and laughed our butts off for hours. It was amazing, honestly. It's a great memory. It's funny, I talked to my husband. We were just talking about this a couple weeks ago. We were driving down the shore and I said, because he knows, he had never met Thom, but he knew of him and how pivotal he was in my life and all these other things. And he said, he's like, "I really wish I would have met him because it's clear how important he was to you, to your growth as a teenager, and even well past after I graduated high school, the time when I would go and just see him back at the school and sit with him and just wanting to be in his presence, honestly. It just gave me such a sense of peace and such a sense of belonging. Yeah, just fantastic opportunity in my life to have spent as much time with him as I got to.
Did you take classes with them after you did this kind of more independent engagement?
So my junior year, I took every class I could that he took. And I also became the editor of Mar News, the newspaper, as well as Fringe, the literary magazine. For that reason, ended up, instead of going to homeroom every morning, would just go to the Mar News room, and instead of going to my regular English class, the whole basically English department, all the teachers knew that I'd be hanging with Thom and they were cool with that. And just literally that became my home base. His classroom and the back room. And I would be there 6 out of the 8 hours that I was in school, including, I had a physics class with a bunch of 12th graders when I was in 11th grade. And Dr. Funk, I think, was my teacher. And for some reason, physics just clicked for me. So when I would go there and I would test really well, and I ended up I stopped going to class. And I remember he came down and he found me down at the Mar newsroom. And he was like, "What are you doing down here? You haven't been to class." And I said, "I'm hanging with Thom." And he's like, "All right, listen, you're the best student I have in my physics class. I'm going to just let you take tests. If this is where you're going to be, and I know you're not leaving school, you can hang here." And I was like, "Cool." So I got that one off my list too, so I didn't have to go that one. And so literally my senior year was, except for like a history class, I was in Thom's class all day. Wow. And junior year. And so you can imagine how many hours we spent hanging out and writing haiku, thousands of haiku. It was awesome.
I can imagine. Did you keep in touch with him after high school?
I did. In a way, he felt like a parent to me, like a friendship, but like just this nurturing, caring, loving person, and I stayed in touch as if he were a parent almost, right? Like just, we would go, I would show up, we would have lunch together from the cafeteria, I'd go get us lunch, we'd hang out, we'd shoot the breeze and email and stuff like that. So we definitely stayed in touch. Probably about 2004 or 5, it was much less frequent that, I was a mother at that point and had moved. And, at that point I had other things going on. And so it was less frequent, but we would still check in and touch base. And then, when he was very sick, and in the hospital, Miss Friedman, Lori, called me, and I was able to talk to him, which was obviously, I was really grateful for that.
Yeah, I didn't know he was sick. I just heard the news that he passed away after a very brief. Yeah, I guess it was a pretty brief illness.
Yeah,
and everyone was shocked. I had just gotten in touch with him maybe not even a year before that. And I don't think I'd been in touch with him since 1983. Like when I was in college, we visited him at his apartment in Westchester. He used to live right off the campus. Mm-hmm. And there was that one time, and we were kind of sharing music with him and stuff. And then just, life happens, you fall out of touch with people. And I moved several places. And I can't remember exactly how I contacted him. Maybe he was on Facebook, or it was email. It was either one of those two. And because I had just started teaching creative writing, I kind of wanted him to know that.
Yeah.
And maybe get some tips, and just to kind of share with him how much I appreciated the influence he had on. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I think I tried to convey that. And he was so nice, and he remembered me and everything. And then we didn't stay in continuous contact, and because I just assumed, well, he'll always be there, and I'll check back in when I have the time. And then all of a sudden December rolled around, and I heard that awful news. I was just devastated.
I remember sitting in his celebration of life, and I so many people got up and shared such wonderful things about him. And I just couldn't even.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you can see I'm like tearing up right now. Like, it was devastating. Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes you just can't. Yeah. It's too difficult.
I couldn't even like articulate or share something because I held it so close to my heart that it felt, even now, like I even struggled with whether or not to talk about it, right? Because there's such important pieces of who I am. And so I cherish those memories so much that like, I don't want to, diminish them in any way by talking about them in a public, you know what I mean?
Right.
I can't explain it really. I hope that makes sense. But
it does. Absolutely. Yeah. What I would recommend is write about it. journal. It's just your private journal. Like, get those thoughts down, those memories. I mean, I'm kind of teaching myself that lesson too. Like, a lot of time went by when I didn't do that.
Yeah.
And now I think because of the COVID stuff and we're all stuck at home, I've been doing a lot more of it.
Yeah.
And this podcast wouldn't have happened without that crisis. I don't think Dave would have had the idea to do the podcast, and we wouldn't be talking about the things we're talking about. But it's been really rewarding. So what other stories can you share, like some of your happy memories of just being with him, or things that he said, or things that you told him?
So one of the things, he and I would write haiku, similar to how you said, right? And this was probably at like the height of his success in being published in haiku. And, he won the TCAN thing, and he was very encouraging of me, like sending all my stuff out. So I was published all over the world.
You were?
I was, yeah.
Awesome.
It was super cool, and he and I would sit and read, just like we read Emerson, and early in our friendship, we would sit and read, obviously, all the haiku classics, right? Issa, Basho, Busan, all of them. And Issa was always my favorite. And so we would always, it was almost like the class, like Issa, Basho, and Busan were all my teachers too, right? Like we talked about them like they were our friends. And I remember it was toward the end of my senior year, and there was a requirement that everybody who was a senior, who was preparing for graduation, had to go and confirm exactly how their name needed to be on their diploma. And we were sitting around, and he was like, he used to call me Cho, right? Cho is Japanese for butterfly. And he's like, Cho, he's like, why don't you like go by, the name of your teacher on your diploma? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, like, you love Issa, like, get it on there. And I was like, how the hell am I going to do that? He's like, just go down there and tell him that's your middle name. And so I did. And so my diploma, I just found it because I haven't seen it in years, but it clearly says Danielle Elizabeth Issa DeCaro. And they read it out loud during graduation. It was, and I remember like the chuckle, like that we pulled one over on the administration. Like that was not my name. I had to go down there and make sure they knew how to pronounce it properly, so they didn't screw it up and, desecrate our beloved Issa. That was just one, we were always doing little things, like almost mischievous little things that we found such humor in, and that is just a little thing. But
how did your family react? Did they notice the name?
They were like, wait, what did they just say? And I was like, they got it. They knew that was part of me at that point. Funny, I have this long-lasting, document that proves it. It's funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, one of the other things I just wanted to mention, after his passing, I connected with Margaret, his wife. I had, connected with her prior, but really was able to personally connect with her, and she was so gracious and so kind, and invited me to go to their house and go through some of his things, and shared with me almost all of his haiku books, of which he had a lot. And I was, I was so thankful for that. I have them to this day. And, I opened the one, and it had a bookmark of him in it, just the other day. And these are the books that I sat through in high school. Here's another one, right? Another bookmark. Sat through in high school and learned the art of haiku writing and wrote with him and photocopied it so I could take parts home and things like that. And I'm lucky enough to be able to have those in my own possession now because Margaret was so kind to share them with me. And very thankful for that, I have some of them. Hold on. I have here's just a couple, right? He used to publish these little, almost like chapbooks of his poetry.
Yeah, chapbooks, cool.
And this one, and this one. This one. He had an evolution of names, So he was Thomas Beverly Williams for a while. Then he was Tom with just T-O-M, and then he eventually went to H-O-M. And I remember him telling me, I said, "What's with the H?" And I remember him telling me that he had talked to someone who had said that having the H in his name would allow for a better path of success because of I don't know if it was numerology or something related to the makeup of the way the letters went together. And that's how he started going to market per se. But that was probably when I was a senior, so a couple years in. So I knew him as TB Dubs.
T-Will.
T-Will.
Did you have a nickname for him? He had one for you.
He did. No, I just called him Tom.
Tom, yep.
Because that's, that's who he was. He was Tom. Yeah.
So it's been about 10 years since he passed away. And what's the legacy for you now? Like if it's a lot of time has gone by, is there certain aspects of your life where you kind of feel his presence or the things that you and him talked about and spent time creating where it sort of resonates?
Yeah. So yes to all of that. I definitely think about him often. One of the things I learned from him is just being connected with the world around you and nature, right? And like the healing power of nature. So oftentimes I think when I remember him, where I feel his presence is related to nature. But kind of a common thing that I always think to myself is something that he told me, which is that you only get to keep what you give away. That theme has been a huge piece of me and how I try to approach things, right? Like if you give away kindness, you typically get kindness, right? If you give away, name it. It could be anything. That I've carried through. I try to carry through every relationship and every even professional conversation, work related, it's just taking that pause and knowing that, what you put out into the world hopefully comes back to you, right?
Right. Not everyone lives that way.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my takeaway from him. I only had him this one semester in high school, but he was such a huge inspiration. And I don't always remember specific things he taught me from the classroom. I remember the haiku was big, but it was more about just being around him and just what he kind of represented or something, or just the aura around him, that's what has really stuck with me. And, even though I am a different person, I have a different personality, I don't have half the charisma that he had, I do think something rubbed off where I try to be more free-spirited and more honest with people and more in the moment with my students. I certainly try to be that way with my family and friends and so forth in my own writing. And I think that's maybe one of the biggest takeaways I have from her. You had a much closer relationship with him. I mean, you guys were like real friends. Mine was more like just kind of brief period, and it just kind of flew through and made this great impression. But that's been so lasting with me. I think of him all the time in that respect. Just like I think of I don't know if you heard the podcast at all, where we talked about him, the one with the story about the hawk.
Yes.
That I just so strongly felt like that was him.
Yeah.
I know that sounds kind of like weirdo, but
no,
it was just, I was like some kind of poetic connection I was making. I was like, when was the last time a hawk stared in your window at you?
I have and I don't even know where I got this, but I have a photo of him hanging in my office at the actual office. I've been working from home with COVID, so I haven't been there in months, but
right.
On the bulletin board right next to my desk, it's him standing next to this bird statue with this face that almost looks like a hawk or like an owl,
Wow.
Making the face just like the bird in like this humorous way that only he and only someone who knew him would know, like he's being funny. And it made me think of that photo when you were talking about that on the podcast.
Yeah, I'd love to see it.
It's get a picture of it. Yeah, next time I breeze through there to see if I have any mail, I'll take a snapshot of it and I'll
text it to me. That would be that's amazing. But just that story. I mean, I was very nervous that day. I was very upset that this was just after he had died.
Yeah.
Right. This in January, I'm back in the classroom, and I was still early in my creative writing teaching career, so I wasn't always confident about what I was doing. And there's something about that hawk that just comforted me. And it was also like your Zen master, he's kind of like snapping you to attention.
Yeah.
Right. And there's this, okay. And then it's kind of like locked in and I just started doing my thing. And it's a very happy memory.
Yeah. Yeah. So, when you needed it most.
Those kind of people don't come along very often in your life.
You're lucky if you get one, honestly.
Thank you so much, Danielle, for sharing your thoughts and memories about Thom Williams with us. We wish you all the best. And if you'd like to see that photo that Danielle was referring to with Thom Williams and the bird statue, we have it posted at our WordPress site. Go to padularasa.com. If you'd like to subscribe to the podcast, please go to anchor.fm or search for us on your favorite podcasting application. If you'd like to drop us a line, give us some feedback, you can leave a comment at the website or you can send us an email, padularasa@gmail.com. As always, thanks for listening, and we hope to be back very, very soon.